Global Times, 25th of November 2023, why have the United States and Australia recently changed their policies regarding China? China launched an all-out attack on the United States and Australia, but after its wolf warrior strategies failed, the country has now altered course. Two recent events are closely related, albeit not in the way one might have predicted. The U.S. business community most recently welcomed Chinese President Xi Jinping and his massive group to San Francisco with open arms. This was especially noticeable on the evening of November 15, during the welcoming meal thrown by friendly organizations. American companies were clamoring to be invited to the event. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese successfully visited China a few days prior, on November 4 to 6. This time, he brought the most significant number of Australian businesses to the 6th China International Import Expo, which was taking place in Shanghai. What connection exists, then, between these two incidents? Take particular note of how U.S. and Australian companies function in each scenario. First, many U.S. business leaders greeted President Xi's team in San Francisco. Second, Australian companies supported Albanese's visit to Shanghai with valuable and tangible measures. Businesses in the US and Australia have undoubtedly been stating, if discreetly and in their unique ways, that sensible, doable, and realistic government policies are necessary for positive commercial relations with China. As many readers know, there haven't been any sensible, workable, or realistic policies on relations with China for the past 4 or 5 years. Since they are widely known, it is not essential to go into details here, but in Australia, this is referred to as China bashing. Many people, including government officials, irresponsible news organizations, and media members, began to love this sport. However, business executives were paying notice, and these government policies eventually negatively impacted their bottom line. And these business leaders began voicing their opinions, particularly those affiliated with institutions that had supported ever deeper economic relations with China for many decades. They were making it very evident that they had had enough. The governments of Australia and the US appear to have finally paid attention. The dynamics of the US, Australia, and all other Western countries need to be examined more thoroughly and comprehensively in light of these changes. The writings of Marx and Engels serve as the foundation for this analysis. Two notable works are the 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte by Karl Marx, 1852, which examines the coup that resulted in Napoleon III's Second French Empire, and The Role of Force in History by Friedrich Engels, 1888. Which looks at how Otto von Bismarck gradually brought the various German states together and made modern Germany the dominant nation in Europe. A contradiction is at the heart of the arguments presented in both publications. In other words, these experiences taught the ruling elite that it is more effective for them to dominate when they do not possess the reins of political authority. Put another way, they frequently choose indirect rule since it is significantly more successful. We must use precise terminology. According to Marx and Engels, the ruling class includes people with capital and industries, such as those engaged in trade and business. Given that they were descended from the traditional French and German aristocracy and landlord class, neither Louis Napoleon nor Bismarck belonged to this group. However, they soon discovered that for the capitalist economies of Germany and France to flourish, they would have to enact policy after policy that enhanced the circumstances for capital owners. This was the perfect strategy for these capital owners, for this actual ruling elite. A lot has changed over the next 150 years, but the general idea remains the same. For instance, I've found that in numerous conversations with business people from Australia and Scandinavia, they underline that they want to continue operating in a favorable environment. If not, they ignore and leave the politicians alone. Nevertheless, the government occasionally introduces laws detrimental to companies' fundamental interests. The previous Australian administration decided to move in an antagonistic direction to China due to internal political winds. The US followed a similar course, particularly in 2017 and 2018. At first, the chambers of commerce, business councils, and corporate leaders chose to hold off, believing that the political tide would soon turn. They made their opinions known, openly communicating to government officials as the detrimental policies persisted and the effects on the economy became increasingly apparent. They declared, "Enough is enough. Modify the policy or face termination." As of this writing, it appears that the governments of the US and Australia have started to modify their policies toward China after paying attention to the advice of their business groups and the ruling class in the economy. What allows us to understand why is precisely an insight provided by Marx and Engels into the nature of political power and the state in Western capitalist nations.